Welcome back. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and today I'm going to be continuing with the Korean drama Flower of Evil. Did you guys know that there is actually a Hindi remake of this drama? It's called Duranga if you're interested, and if you have watched it, do let me know whether you liked it or not and how similar it was to the original. I know that Indian dramas like to add some flair to things, so I'm quite curious about how it turned out. If you haven't already watched the first part, let me do a quick recap. Our story revolves around a married couple, Baek Hee-sung, the husband, and Cha Ji-won, the wife. They are your picture-perfect couple, the kind of couple that everyone wants to be. Ji-won is a gutsy, crime-fighting police officer with a soft spot for her husband, and Hee-sung is a sweet stay-at-home dad who owns a metal workshop on the first floor of their home. And they have the cutest daughter, Baek Eun-ha, who is around 6 years old, and she's a total daddy's girl. She loves her father more than anything in the entire world. The adorable family has a couple minor issues. The first is that Hee-sung's parents, so Ji-won's in-laws, they don't care for Ji-won and Eun-ha. Actually, most of the time it looks like they don't even care for their own son. In fact, Hee-sung's mom constantly reminds Hee-sung, her son, that he doesn't own his own life. But Hee-sung is strange too, because his response to that is that his life is hers as long as he lives as Baek Hee-sung, which is odd, but let's move on. Moo-jin is your typical reporter. He loves getting scoops on cases, and he also has this obsession with a serial killing that took place around 18 years ago. He eventually published an article about the serial killer and his son, which caught the attention of a lot of just people living in Korea. So one day, while investigating the father-son case, Moo-jin's pen runs out of ink, but thankfully, Chae-Won was there to save the day. She hands over her husband's business card so that he can go get himself a custom pen, and Moo-jin makes a pit stop at Hee-sung's store. But when he sees Hee-sung, he calls him Hyun-soo. Do Hyun-soo, as in the son of the serial killer Moo-jin is actively reporting on. And the next thing Moo-jin knows, he's being choked, gagged, and thrown into Hee-sung's basement. And 2 stories above, Hee-sung is still the ever-loving and ever-doting father and husband. Every day he gets up before his wife, locks himself in the bathroom, and practices how to smile for 10 minutes before preparing an amazing breakfast for his wife and kid. When Chae-Won is at work and Eun-ha is at school, he finally goes down into the basement to visit his guest. And it's during this visit that we learn about the bad blood between Moo-jin and Hee-sung/Hyun-soo. Hyun-soo and Moo-jin are from the same village, Kagyeong-ri, and this village is where the serial killer To Min-seok made his home. Min-seok had a metal workshop, a house, 2 kids, and a hill behind his house where he buried all the people he killed. Min-seok had an MO, a noose around the neck of his victims, a permanent injury to their ankle, and a removal of both of their thumbnails. Life was going great for Min-seok until it wasn't. One day Min-seok randomly committed suicide, and it was while the police were investigating the suicide that they found out about the serial killings. And Min-seok's kid, Hyun-soo and Hae-soo, I guess Min-seok's kids, so he had both a son and a daughter, were left to deal with the aftermath. Moo-jin decides that Hyun-soo is the perfect target to bully in school. Once he even tied Hyun-soo to a tree, got his friends to throw rocks at him, and all this bullying only stopped after Hyun-soo fled the village. But the day Hyun-soo ran away was also the day the village foreman of Kagyeong-ri was murdered. In present day, it feels like all the killers in the city suddenly love Min-seok. Ji-won's team got 2 cases back to back where people killed just like how Min-seok killed all of his victims 18 years ago. Ji-won's team solved the first case where the perpetrator was just this messed up woman who killed a grandmother because she didn't want to climb stairs. The second perpetrator, however, is still loose. The victim this time is someone who had a history with Hyun-soo, Nam Seung-gil. Seung-gil and Hyun-soo actually worked at this Chinese restaurant for 3 years for under-the-table wages. And one night, Seung-gil lures Hyun-soo into a forest and stabs him in the shoulder. Why? Because he needs money. So he was gonna kill Hyun-soo and steal his money. Hyun-soo retaliates and almost drives the same knife into Seung-gil, but to his horror, his father shows up with beady black eyes and tries to egg Hyun-soo on to commit murder. In a panic, Hyun-soo gets off of Seung-gil and runs out of the forest onto a road where he gets hit by a car. And now in 2020, after seeing the article that Moo-jin has published about the Yeonju serial murder case, Seung-gil reached out to Moo-jin to meet up. He had some information information about Hyunsu that he wanted to give Moojin, but the meeting ended up being taken over the phone with Hyunsu on the other end pretending to be Moojin because, Moojin was tied up in his basement at the moment. During this phone call, we find out that Seung-gil thinks he's getting blackmailed by Hyunsu because someone keeps calling him at night asking him if he's happy, but Hyunsu brushes it off because that's not him. And later that night, Seung-gil gets murdered with the same exact MO as Min-seok. Chae-Won and her team scramble to get more information about Seung-gil, and they learn about his connection to Hyunsu as well as his connection to Moojin. And because of that connection to Hyunsu is forced to let Moojin go when Chae-Won starts looking for Moojin. But Hyunsu makes sure that he can still keep Moojin under his thumb. Hyunsu managed to get his hands on a tape that Moojin had from their middle school days. And this is a tape that could have served as evidence of Min-seok's crimes long before the actual investigation took place. Now Hyunsu has to figure out who the four killed Seung-gil in such a way to point the finger at him. And things are growing worse because his mother is angry as hell that his real name is getting mentioned in the news. If anyone ever gets a whiff that her and her husband have swapped the identity of their child, it's the end for all of them. And we ended the episode with Hyunsu's adopted father entering a secret room in their gigantic mansion of a house where a man lies in a comatose state, with Hyunsu's adopted father whispering, I tried to make that as quick and as clear as possible, but if you want more detail or something just isn't adding up, feel free to either leave a comment down below or go watch the first part. And with that, let's bring it back to young Chae-Won and Hee-sung. There's a nice summer rain in their little town, and Chae-Won and Hee-sung are taking cover underneath this shop entrance area when Chae-Won suddenly starts laughing. What's so funny? I'm wearing new clothes, new shoes, and I spent an hour styling my hair. Am I unlucky or what? So much for a first date. A date? Two people having fun together? Isn't that what a date is? But I'm not interested in you. Then why did you spend time with me on your day off? Well, that's because you'll bother me less if I go out with you once. That hurts, the owner of the fried chicken store said that your eyes always lingered on me every time I walked by, and while buying an ice pop, a 5th grader, Sunwoo, asked if we were dating. Has it ever occurred to you that you're the only one who doesn't know that you like me? She looks at him for 2 awkward minutes and then gives up. You're impossible. Let's play rock, paper, scissors and have the loser stand out in the rain for 30 seconds. No way, I don't indulge in such silly games. But when Chae-Won plays rock, paper, scissors, shoot, he puts out a rock while Chae-Won puts out a paper. She pushes him out from underneath the store into the rain and starts laughing while he's getting soaked. Hee-sung at first looks at her face that's lit up with joy, and he finds himself for the first time in a very long time smiling as well. Now, I can't tell if this is a real genuine smile or another imitation of Ji-won's expression, but either way, it doesn't last very long because standing at the corner of the street is his father, Min-seok. You still can't see the whites of his eyes, and he's still holding that same hound dog collar, but this time he has the most unsettling smirk on his face. Hee-sung, who was smiling up until now, folds his hands into a fist, and he looks like he's going to cry any minute now, until Chae-Won calls out to him. Hee-sung? What's wrong? Hee-sung turns to look at her. You're really weird, you know that? Why do you like me? Why? I really don't get it. How could you like a guy like me? Never mind. There's no point in talking to you. I should get going. And he leaves her there with tears rolling down her face. Back in present time, Hee-sung is having a little fight with his mom. She's slapping him while yelling, "Why did you have to get married and get yourself into this mess? I told you countless times to just go live abroad. But marriage? How dare you try to live like everybody else? Don't ruin our lives along with yours. Imagine what would happen if people find out about us. I don't want to think about it. That better not happen. If it does, I'll kill myself right in front of you." Hee-sung goes to grab some calming medicine and hands it to her. "Calm down. Nothing has happened yet. You should drink this. He's a guy named Nam Seung-gil. We met while I was young and something happened between us. I think that's why things got so messed up." The mom drinks the medicine before sitting down. "I'm sorry that I slapped you. Did it hurt?" And by this point, her hands are shaking as she tries to hold on to the medicine bottle, and she continues. "I don't know why I can't fix this damn habit of mine. You should tie my hands together if I get too worked up again." What about your wife? She doesn't know anything, right? She's in charge of this case. The mom throws the medicine bottle across the room. What? What did I tell you? I warned you, didn't I? I told you she'll make things worse. I didn't like her from the start. You should be careful with her. She's so freaking two-faced. How could you marry someone like her? Mother, the culprit was caught on the CCTVs, and he even left bloodstains at the scene. The case will be solved, and we'll be fine. They may be after Hyunsoo, but it won't lead them to Heesung. That is, as long as you continue to stay by my side. The mom tells Heesung that he should leave, but before Heesung walks out, she tells him to come over every now and then for dinner. Their house is too big just for 2 people. But Heesung reminds her that it's not just the 2 of them. And of course, he's referring to the unconscious man in the hospital bed in their house. The father enters the room, and the room itself is filled with math awards, math certificates, and math trophies. So it's obvious that this man who's now lying in a comatose state was some sort of math genius. The father gets to work filling a feeding tube with some liquid, and just to make sure that nobody is lost at this point, this guy in this makeshift hospital room is the actual Baek Heesung. The Heesung that we've been seeing up until now is Do Hyunsoo, the son of the serial killer Do Min-suk. But remember that the police are after Hyunsoo because they think that he killed Sung-gil. And during their investigation, they find out that Hyunsoo had an older sister, Do Hae-soo. She's the same age as Chae-Won, so the team decides that Chae-Won would be the best person to meet Hae-soo in person to question her. So what is Hae-soo doing right now? She's in a building inside a pool, and this pool doesn't have any water in it, but there's a very bloody person laying in the middle. Hae-soo, who has blood dripping from her fingers, approaches him. How does it feel? It doesn't hurt anymore, does it? After a couple seconds of silence, the man wakes up and says, "It doesn't sting, but it smells weird. Is this smell normal? I feel like it smells a bit acidic. Is it okay?" It's the smell of liquid latex. It's pretty much not toxic. So she's basically a special effects artist. I think that's what they're called, and she's doing her job trying to make this man look as dead as possible when she gets a call from Chae-Won to meet up. Chae-Won heads to the coffee shop that they agreed with, and there, sitting on the sofa, is a woman with her head down, drinking her coffee. Chae-Won approaches her. "Do Hae-soo, I'm Detective Cha-Ji-won, the person that called you?" Hae-soo is a Brit, frightened. "How did you know that I was Hae-soo? Do I really look that similar to Do Min-suk?" And it feels like she's really afraid of being associated with her father. "No, it's not that. I just guessed. Here's my business card." Chae-Won tries to hand Hae-soo her business card, but Hae-soo cuts her off. "I don't know anything. After Hyunsoo disappeared in 2002, I never saw him again. For 18 years, I've met with tons of cops and told them the same thing. Can I go now?" Hae-soo gets up to leave, but Chae-Won stops her. "That's not what I came to ask. About $900,000 in assets held by Min-suk have not yet been processed as your inheritance. The house in Paju, the workshop in Kaguri, and the vacation house in Taeyeon. As far as I know, that is. Why did you sell the plots of land but leave the buildings? It's almost like you left places of refuge for Hyunsoo." Hae-soo freezes for a few seconds before scoffing. "I guess that cops investigate based off imagination now. I sold the land to pay for the family's victims. Other than that, I'm not interested in that monster's money. I haven't seen our Hyunsoo for 18 years already. How many more times must I tell you that for you to believe me? Our Hyunsoo. If you had to deal with the press and the media and the police all alone for 18 years, you must resent your brother a great deal. But you seem sad." Hae-soo has no rebuttal to that, so she just gets up and leaves. Moojin, who is now clocked into work, has one big question in his mind. Where did the real Baek Heesung go? He tries to search for Baek Heesung on Google, or at least the Korean version of Google, and everything that comes up is information about the singer-actor Heesung. He tries again with metal craftsman Baek Heesung, and the first few results are absolutely useless. But one article pops up, and it's an article about the Ilshin University Hospital director Baek Man-woo. And in that article, there's a question about his son Baek Heesung, who is a math god. And Moojin can't help but feel that Hyunsoo found himself a very cushy identity. Moojin's boss then comes up to him to give him these 2 police case files. One is a stack on the father's case, so Min-suk's case, and the second is a stack on the son's case, so Hyunsoo's case. The boss really wants him to get that exclusive, but everyone is barking up the wrong tree because it's not Hyunsoo. so he sends Hyun-soo a text. Hyun-soo, who had just finished taking a shower and is now drying his hair, reads the text, and it reads, "How is the police investigation going?" And Hyun-soo can't answer that because he himself doesn't know. He opens the bathroom door, and just outside is Chae-Won standing there with his black coat in hand. She asks him to put it on, and once he does, she starts thinking out loud. "The Chinese restaurant murder case. You came home like this last night. And what about it? This raincoat is common. What, do you think I went out into the middle of the night and committed murder?" Thankfully, Chae-Won doesn't think that. "Don't be silly. When you came home like this, I was startled and didn't recognize you at first. So how did Seung-gil recognize him right away? The killer was wearing a mask too." Hee-sung/Hyun-soo tries to make this alternative suggestion that maybe he was mistaken, that it wasn't Hyun-soo, but Chae-Won shuts him down pretty fast. "No, the killer has to be Hyun-soo. I have to catch him to get that special promotion for solving a cold case. Go to bed first. I have a lot to look over." And I'm going to start calling Hee-sung, or at least the fake Hee-sung, as Hyun-soo, which is his real name from now on. So just know that the fake Hee-sung and Hyun-soo are the same exact person. He just stole someone's identity. Chae-Won heads to their couch in the living room where she has set up base, looking through the village foreman murder case and the Yeonju City serial murder case. And she's looking through the case files when Hyun-soo comes in and lays his head on her lap. "I want to sleep here tonight. I don't want to go sleep in there." Chae-Won smiles at him and then starts thinking out loud again. Did they really not know? I wonder if the kids really didn't know that their father was a serial killer, especially since the father probably had an influence on Hyun-soo developing antisocial personality disorder. Anyway, it's a good case. What do you mean by that? It's a good case study for researching the effect that DNA plays in developing antisocial personality disorder. And Hyun-soo looks slightly uncomfortable. "So, do you think they'll catch the killer soon?" "We have his DNA, so all we have to really do is confirm his face, but it's not easy. We're gonna get a sketch together. There's someone who can confirm Hyun-soo's face. The owner of the Chinese restaurant where he worked at. I wonder where he disappeared to. How could he disappear without a trace like that?" Hyun-soo's wheels are turning in his head because Chae-Won can't find out about him. He pulls her away from the papers, and they both lie down on the sofa to take a nap. Chae-Won takes a good look at him and says, "Oh my gosh, was my husband always this handsome? What, did you forget how I looked like just for one day of not seeing me? No way, I can recognize you even from your shadow." Chae-Won is slowly falling asleep when Hyun-soo asks her, "I guess that reporter Kim is also going to participate in putting together the sketch?" "That's right, we have him too. We'll have to compare that with the restaurant owner. But did I tell you that reporter Kim knew Hyun-soo?" "Yes, while you were changing earlier, that they went to school together." Chae-Won scooches closer to Hyun-soo and says, "I'm telling you all sorts of things. You can't tell anyone what I tell you, okay?" In another part of Korea, a grandmother is cutting up some vegetables in front of a TV while listening to the news. And the news, of course, is talking about Hyun-soo and how the police investigation is getting hindered because they don't have any recent photos of him. All they have to go off of is his middle school photo, and once the grandma hears this, she realizes that she has a much more recent photo of him. She gets up from her vegetables, looks through her photo album, and there it is. In the background of her photos is Hyun-soo with a very pregnant Chae-Won. She immediately calls the police station, and Chae-Won has to make sure that this isn't some sort of prank call, so she asks the grandma, "Are you sure it's him? My neighbor and I debated over it for a really long time, but I'm quite sure of it. I saw him grow up in this town, and the more I look at him, the more I see his father in him. We have someone who can verify that, so we would appreciate if you provided us the photo, but you can't show the photo to anyone else until we get there, okay?" With the promise that she won't show the photo to anyone else, they hang up, and then Chae-Won calls Ho-jun. Ho-jun at the moment is trying to get a composite sketch of Hyun-soo from both the Chinese restaurant owner and Moo-jin, but the two of them just can't seem to agree on how Hyun-soo looks. Moo-jin is purposefully giving them a false description because Hyun-soo had asked him to stop them from putting together the sketch, and the restaurant owner keeps saying that Moo-jin is wrong, but Moo-jin keeps gaslighting the old man by asking him how good his memory is at 70 years old. Ho-jin is slowly realizing that they're completely inept, and he's getting annoyed at their inability to agree on what Hyun-soo's features look like when he gets the call from Chae-Won. He tells Moo-jin that he no longer needs a sketch because they have someone who has a photo, and Moo-jin, realizing that things can get bad super fast, immediately calls Hyun-soo. Hyun-soo, meanwhile, was in a taxi learning how to act sad. The video tells him, the focus in your eyes is crucial when you're trying to look sad. Let's take a look at what a sad expression looks like. The corners of the mouth look like they're being pulled down, and then there's no focus in your eyes. The reason he's learning this is because he's going to see Seung-gil's wife, disguised as reporter Kim Woo-jin. I can only imagine what your grief looks like, so I thank you again for agreeing to do this interview. I've covered so many stories being a reporter, but this one definitely hits close to home. His eyes are tearing up as he says this, and Seung-gil's wife hands him a tissue, and she remembers him. I heard that you were the last person that my husband spoke to. If only I had picked up. I'm truly sorry. No, don't be. This isn't your fault. Please don't put the blame on yourself. It's just that I feel so responsible, and that's why I asked this. Your husband was attacked at 3 a.m. Why do you think he was still at the restaurant at this time? It's been about 2 months or so. Once a week, he'd stay up really late trying to invent this new recipe. And Hyun-soo realizes that the attacker knew this to be a fact. So who could it have been? Seung-gil's wife can't think of anyone else other than her who knew this fact. Seung-gil's wife walks Hyun-soo out, and he's of course telling her to call him if she remembers anything. And he's walked maybe 10 steps from the house when the wife remembers something. The taxi! Mr. Kim, the taxi! My husband used to call a taxi every time he came home late, and he always came home in the same exact car. Hyun-soo is walking back home when Woo-jin's call comes through. I'm glad you called. I need you to look into something. There's a taxi company called Yigang Call Taxi. Now is not the time for that, Hyun-soo. I have both good and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first? You have bad news? What is it? Remember that lady named Pokja? Well, apparently she has a photo of you from 5 years ago. There's even worse news. Do you want to hear it? What is it? The cops are going to go and get it. Detective Cha is going. Your wife is on her way to catch you. What's the good news then? That I'm on your side? Where are you right now? Back at the police station, Chae-Won and Ho-jun are leaving to go to the grandma's house, but Detective Choi looks bothered. Woo-chul, their team leader, asks him what's wrong, and Detective Choi feels that instead of chasing after Hyun-soo, I feel like we're getting dragged along by him somehow. He's pacing around his workstation when he sees the tumbler of the taxi driver that he had called in for questioning earlier. Why didn't he come back for this? He calls the taxi driver to tell him that he'll throw it out if he doesn't come and get it. And the taxi driver apologizes, saying that it's just been really hectic at work. He says that he'll get it today, for sure, before hanging up. But in reality, the taxi driver, is parked outside the Kangsu police station with no passenger in his car. He then pulls out this wired earphones and puts them into his ear. And Woo-chul's voice comes through. Detective Choi, where are we with the dashcam footage from the cars parked around the Musan Villa? I had no luck with the ones that came in from this morning. I'll have to do another sweep. Don't look so glum. Once we have Hyun-soo's photo, this case will practically solve itself. I just have a bad feeling today. Should I have gone with them? The taxi driver had set up a bug in his tumbler that he left in the police station. And we find out that he's the taxi driver that Seung-gil's wife was telling Hee-sung about. One day he was driving Seung-gil back from his restaurant when a slightly drunken Seung-gil asked the taxi driver to borrow his phone. Your phone, give me your phone and let me make a call to my wife. My battery died. My wife is waiting for my call. The driver hands Seung-gil his phone, but Seung-gil notices something interesting attached to his phone. A wooden rectangle with a golden fish with black scales painted on it. When Seung-gil and Hyun-soo were still on slightly good terms, he saw that Hyun-soo would always listen to things on this old Walkman that he had, and that Walkman had the same exact wooden rectangle with a golden fish with black scales painted onto it attached to it. For a brief moment, he thought that maybe the taxi driver was Hyun-soo. Meanwhile, Chae-Won and Ho-jun are both in the car getting ready for a really long drive when Chae-Won gets curious. What happened to the composite sketch? They both had different memories, so it didn't really go very well. Well, we'll know once we get the photos, so let's go. And what the heck are Woo-jin and Hyun-soo doing while Chae-Won and Ho-jun are going to get this photo? Well, Woo-jin is in his car waiting, but he's not just idly waiting around. Instead, Woo-jin's got this little recorder stick, and he presses the record button and then looks for a place to hide it. But he's too slow because Hyun-soo opens the car door, and Woo-jin, in a panic, hides the recorder in his coat pocket. Hey, you're here! Do you think that we'll be able to get there first? I know for a fact we'll be able to get there first because they'll for sure be following the traffic rules. Moojin shoots him a look before stepping on the gas. Chae-Won and Hojun, who are following the traffic rules, get into a conversation about Min-seok. Hojun is in disbelief that they're on their way to a real crime scene of a serial murderer, but he's also confused. 7 people were buried in that small town, and I'm surprised that none of the residents noticed anything. Only 6 of the bodies were found, Hojun. Right, the last body was never found. I'm guessing that the culprit buried the victim somewhere new. Where could that be? I hope that we at least find her body. And Chae-Won voices her confusion. But why did he commit suicide? If he hadn't committed suicide, then no one would have ever found out about the murders. The cops were investigating Min-seok's suicide, and that's how they found out about the killings. Do you really think he committed suicide? They only found out that the victim's right fingernails were in Min-seok's workshop. Then what about the left? Do you think that he could have shared them with someone? For example, his son? And while Chae-Won is questioning whether Hyun-soo was in on it or not, Moojin is trying to make conversation as well. It'd be amazing if we could catch the culprit first. The cops and the press are all after Hyun-soo, but imagine how it would be if a reporter catches the culprit and then writes an article about it. Doesn't that just sound so great? You're not listening. Why do you have my sister's necklace? Oh, that, well, I just happened to, how is that Jesus? I bought it for her, so it's mine. I got it back when we broke up. I totally forgot about it, but I found it in a drawer one day and I was gonna fix it up and sell it. Do you have a problem with that? I threw it away. What? Hey, why would you do that? You can't sell it anyway, it's way too cheap. Moojin curses him out silently, and then he checks his coat pocket to make sure that his recording device is still there before saying, Hyun-soo, let me ask you something. How did Hyun-soo become Hee-sung? Are you interviewing me right now? How did you manage to fool Detective Cha? Moojin, Chae-Won knows nothing about me. She doesn't know about my past, and she doesn't know that I'm abnormal. Do you really not have any feelings for her? People say you become, more affectionate to your spouse once you have kids. I need Chae-Won by my side. My dad is scared of her. He won't be able to come near me as long as she's with me. What are you saying? You're creeping me out. I'll promise one thing. Hyun-soo reaches into Moojin's front coat pocket and takes out the recorder, flustering Moojin, and then Hyun-soo proceeds to delete all of the recordings that are on the device before continuing. If Chae-Won ever finds out what you know, I will really kill you. A couple hours after the sun has set, Moojin and Hyun-soo have made their way into Gagyeongri, the place where Hyun-soo grew up and the place where Bokcha has Hyun-soo's photo. And almost immediately, Hyun-soo is bombarded with things that he'd much rather forget. He remembers being bullied by Moojin. He remembers being dragged to an exorcism by the elders of the village, being forced to lie down on the mat while salt was being thrown on him to get the demon, and I say that in quotes, out of him, as the shaman who was performing the ritual poked and beat him. Moojin hands Hyun-soo a baseball hat and tells him the plan. First, I'm gonna meet with Miss O and have her focus on me. I'll say that I'm writing about the case and ask her to show me the photo. And then I'll text you where she puts the picture. Then I'll lure Miss O out saying that we should greet the cops that are coming all the way from Seoul. And when we're outside, you go inside and steal the picture. No, actually, you bring it out nicely and I'll hold the cops back. While I buy time, you get out of there safely and then we meet at the meetup spot. What do you think? Simple, right? They arrive at Grandma's Bunok's house and Hyun-soo asks, what if she doesn't show you the picture? What if you can't lure her out? What if you can't hold back the cops? Do you have a better idea? If not, don't complain and go hide in there. Hyun-soo goes to hide on the shed that's on the property while Moojin goes inside. Moojin calls out the grandma's name hoping that she'll come outside and greet him warmly. But when he doesn't hear anything, he goes a little further inside. And there he sees the grandma passed out on the floor with her hands and feet tied up. Moojin hurriedly undoes the tape around her arms, or at least is trying to, but the grandma wakes up and she starts signaling to him. Careful. What? Be careful. Full? Watch your back! But before Moojin can fully turn around, he gets bonked on the head with a wooden cane. He manages to catch a really blurry glimpse of his attacker, but the man is wearing a mask, so he can't figure out who exactly it is before he passes out. But when he passes out, his recorder falls out of his phone pocket and slides underneath a dresser. Meanwhile, Hyunsoo is waiting in the shed, wondering what in the fort is taking Woojin so long when he sees a figure in a black raincoat and a mask walking out of the house. The man stops at the entrance of the house and then turns around before walking towards the back entrance. Hyunsoo runs after him and catches him just before he can jump over the back wall into the forest. They have this little tussle where Hyunsoo manages to rip the black man's jacket off of him and he throws it onto the floor before pinning the mystery man to a nearby tree. He rips the mask off of the mystery man and he's lost. Who are you? Now, he doesn't know this man, but we do. It's the taxi driver that Detective Chae was questioning earlier. Hyunsoo, I don't know you. Why are you doing this to me? You may not know me, but you must know Chon Mi-suk. What? Where is Mi-suk? The cops will be here soon. Do you really have time to chit-chat like this? Neither of us wants to see the cops. Let's meet by ourselves, without the cops. There's this nice inn by the fishing spot. I'll pick you up from there in my cab tonight. I've been waiting so long for this first date. We both need time to doll up, don't you think? While this little tussle is going on between the two of them, Chae-Won and Hojun have arrived at the house and they see that Woojin's car is parked and Chae-Won is annoyed. How does he know about the photo? Chae-Won gets out and starts calling out for the grandma when she sees a black coat laying on the ground. Hyunsoo, who didn't realize that Chae-Won had arrived, is shocked to hear her voice, and the taxi driver uses this to push Hyunsoo off of him and jumps over the wall, running away. Hyunsoo takes a few seconds to gather himself, and he's about to jump over the wall himself when Chae-Won yells out, "Hyunsoo!" Hyunsoo freezes for a second. He's contemplating if he should jump, because the moment he runs away, he confirms to her that he is Hyunsoo. But he has to. He can't have Chae-Won finding out like this. He forces himself not to look at her before leaping over the wall and running away. But Chae-Won doesn't waste a single second. She leaps over the same exact wall and gives him a chase. And she is fast. She follows him through the woods, on the street, and into a warehouse. It's the middle of the night and this warehouse has no lights. Chae-Won takes out her phone and turns on the flashlight on her phone. And she grabs a wrench for protection before she starts looking around. She sees this light switch that's dangling from the ceiling, and Hyunsoo, who has been hiding in this shelf, or behind this shelf that's on the opposite end of the warehouse, sees Chae-Won reaching for it to turn the light on. And he can't have that because then she would definitely see his face. He silently grabs a hammer, and the moment Chae-Won turns the switch on, he launches the hammer towards Chae-Won. It hits the light, causing sparks to fly, and this distracts Chae-Won just enough to give Hyunsoo time to grab a blanket and throw it around Chae-Won's head. A struggle ensues where Chae-Won headbutts Hyunsoo while screaming, "Let go of me!" And Hyunsoo has to hold in his scream of pain, and to make it worse, she kicks him where the sun does not shine. Chae-Won throws Hyunsoo off of her and tries to get the blanket that he's put on her off of her as well, but she ends up tripping and falling against the shelf. And on top of the shelf is a plastic bin filled with metal tools. The bin is now teetering on the edge, and Hyunsoo, seeing this, rushes over and covers Chae-Won with his own body. And that too just in time, because a second later it would have been Chae-Won getting hit and stabbed by all these metal tools instead of Hyunsoo. While he's covering her, he manages to get his hands on Chae-Won's handcuffs, and he takes her hands and cuffs it to a shelf next to her before running away. Chae-Won never even gets to see his shadow because he's long gone by the time that she manages to get that blanket off of her. And to make things worse, her phone is a couple feet away, so she can't even call for help. Back at Grandma Punok's house, Woojin finally regains his consciousness and he crawls out of the house nursing his bloody head. Hojun rushes towards him, but Woojin sends him to the grandma first. And when they get loaded into the ambulance, Woojin calls Hyunsoo. "Hello, where on earth are you? I nearly died, you know that? So, what happened?" "Find out who Jon Mi-suk is. That's the name that he told me." "Jon Mi-suk? Wait, I've heard that name before. He asked me where she was. She must be connected to me somehow." And Hyunsoo hangs up. Woojin sits there thinking about where he's heard the name Jon Mi-suk before. Hojun finds Chae-Won handcuffed to a shelf in the warehouse, and he can't help but joke. "Chae-Won, are you kidding me? I was worried sick about you. Get me out of these cuffs first. I'm humiliated as it is." "Are you injured?" "No, I'm fine." And Hojun is a little confused. It's a mess in here. Are you sure you're okay? You could have broken a bone or something. And Chae-Won takes a look around, finally, at all the metal tools that are scattered around her. And she's confused for a second, but quickly gets over it because the case is far more important. Ho-jin tells her that the photo got stolen, and Chae-Won is wondering how Hyun-soo even knew about the photo to begin with. And that's when Ho-jin tells her that it wasn't Hyun-soo. The grandma had told Ho-jin that some random man came over, took the photo, and started asking which man in the photo was Hyun-soo. So their culprit is someone who is looking for Hyun-soo, not actually Hyun-soo himself. Chae-Won quickly gathers all the village residents, and she starts by apologizing for calling them in so late at night. But they all say, of course, don't even mention it. We should all be here after what happened to Bokja. My gosh, how terrifying. How can we continue to live here? Is Hyun-soo really back? See, what did I tell you? Just like his father, that boy is possessed by a ghost. We should have continued with the exorcisms back then. That last comment raises some concerns for Chae-Won, but she doesn't bring it up at the moment. Instead, she says, the person we're after isn't Hyun-soo. We're after someone who's chasing after Hyun-soo. Did someone come from outside this town to try to ask about Hyun-soo? And the villagers laugh. They don't even know where to start. Every day for the past 20 years, they've had TV producers, journalists, reporters, writers, and cops, all of them visiting, asking about Hyun-soo. But Chae-Won asks them to think harder. The culprit we're after holds a deep grudge against Hyun-soo, and one of the residents remembers something. That taxi driver. Back at the police station, Detective Chae finally got his hands on the dash cam footage from the New Sun Villas. He starts watching it and he gets excited when the taxi finally comes into view. He's going to catch the culprit. The taxi pulls up to the side. It stays there for a couple seconds before driving off again. No one got off. And that's when Woo-cheol, who was hovering over Detective Chae, gets a call from Ho-jin. Woo-cheol, it isn't Hyun-soo. Chae-Won approaches Ho-jin and takes the phone from him. Woo-cheol, there's a victim of Min-suk's murders whose body was never found. Please look into her husband. He's probably a taxi driver. Out of all of the 7 victims, there was one whose body was never found. The search got called off and her husband came by town whenever he could and dug up the area around where all the other bodies were found. He seemed really unstable. He believed Hyun-soo to be an accomplice of Min-suk and became obsessed. He thought that Hyun-soo knew where his wife was. However, Woo-cheol, I have no idea how the killer knew about the photo Miss Oh had. I'm afraid that it could have been leaked during our investigation. And that's when Detective Chae remembers the tumbler that the taxi driver left at the station. He rushes over, opens the lid, and on the inside of the lid is a bug. And we finally get the full series of events. The taxi driver had talked to Seung-gil about Hyun-soo. The driver had told Seung-gil that Hyun-soo was an accomplice. He knows that to be a fact because the wooden rectangle with the golden fish with the black scales was something that he made for his wife. They had found his wife's phone at Min-suk's workshop, but not the piece of wood. Seung-gil tells them to just lay off of it and let the cops handle it. But the taxi driver has seen the cops investigate. They just didn't care. They weren't interested in catching Hyun-soo at all, unless he does something to attract everyone's attention. And that was his plan, to murder Seung-gil and make it look like a copycat of how Min-suk used to murder his victims. And of course, all the attention would shift to Hyun-soo. He picked the day, got all the supplies, murdered Seung-gil, and got into the back of his own taxi. After sitting for a few seconds, he climbs over the seats back into the driver's seat and watches as everything goes according to plan. Now to Hyun-soo. He's made a quick stop at the pharmacy because getting hit by all those metal tools really did a number on his body. He then gets a small room near the fishing spot and he's going to take the taxi driver up on his offer. He takes a moment to settle in before punching the mirror in his room. He breaks the mirror and picks up a piece of glass and wraps the bottom portion of it with duct tape. He slips it into his pocket when his phone rings. It's his mother-in-law calling, and Hee-sung picks up to see Eun-ha, his daughter, crying her eyes out. She's upset because her dad abandoned her with her grandma in the middle of the night. Hyun-soo tells her that something urgent came up, but he'll be home as soon as he can, and he has to hang up when he sees a taxi pulling up to the fishing area. Chae-Won had handed the phone back to Ho-jin to finish up their briefing when another officer approaches Chae-Won. He hands her a little Ziploc bag with a watch in it, a watch that is eerily familiar. The officer asks her, "Detective, can you take a look at this? We found it inside the warehouse, and we were wondering if it belongs to you." And it doesn't belong to her. but it looks like something that belongs to her husband. She turns the Ziploc bag around to look at the back of the watch bands, and there, engraved on the back of the band, are the initials H.S. Beck. Remember, she gave those watch bands to Hee-sung/Hyunsoo as a gift for his 39th birthday. Let's go back to the winter of 2006. Young Chae-Won is manning the counter of their local convenience store again, and she's staring at a young Hyunsoo who had come in to buy some drinks. But when he starts approaching, she quickly diverts her attention back to the textbooks in front of her. And the vibes of this whole thing are like, this is a really cute first love for Chae-Won, where she's hopelessly enamored by this man, but she doesn't want him to know just yet. So she's pretend studying when he approaches the counter to pay, but while he's handing her the cash, the power in the shop goes out. The electricity went out again, and my mom isn't even here. And Chae-Won looks a little frightened to be left in the dark, so she pulls out some candles and starts looking for a lighter. Where is it again? Hyunsoo, who had just been staring at her up until now, pulls out a lighter from his pocket and lights the candles. He hands Chae-Won the money for the drinks and then turns around to leave when Chae-Won calls out to him. Excuse me? The last time there was a blackout, the fruit store across the street got robbed and the culprit was never found. When he doesn't say anything after that little speech, she tells him to forget it and she bids him a good night. She was basically trying to ask him to stay until the power came back on because she was scared, but she couldn't get the words out. Hyunsoo walks out of the store, but he doesn't actually leave. He stands just outside the shop, staring ahead, and Chae-Won sees him through the window and is like, what on earth? What is he doing? Why hasn't he left yet? After a couple minutes, it starts snowing, but Hyunsoo is still just standing there. He has his palm out trying to catch some of the snowflakes that are falling, and that's how they spend the next few minutes, with Hyunsoo catching the snow and Chae-Won watching him. A couple more minutes pass and the power comes back on. The sudden lights blind Chae-Won, but she manages to catch a glimpse of Hyunsoo wordlessly turning around and walking away. He'd kept her company until the power came back. And it's things like this that put Chae-Won in her current state. It's a spring of that same year, and she's now drunk on a park bench confronting Hyunsoo, who is standing in front of her. You hit on me first. My friends said that you did that because you like me. Being the big-hearted person I am, I confess my feelings first, but you dare respond by playing hard to get? I hate it, you know? Hyunsoo isn't impressed. Get up, it's late. You should go home. Whether I go home or sleep on this bench is none of your business. Who do you think you are? Why are you so curious as to where I am? And Hyunsoo is like, you're the one who called me. Plus, every time you don't come home, your mom seeks me out because she's worried. Chae-Won doesn't have a rebuttal, so she asks for something else instead. Give me a piggyback ride. I'm too exhausted to walk, so at least you can carry me home. When Hyunsoo doesn't respond to that, she tells him to just be on his way. It's weird to strike up a conversation with a stranger. Hyunsoo rolls his eyes and starts walking away when she yells after him. But you like me. I know it. I can see it. It's obvious to me. He turns around and starts walking back to Chae-Won. What is it that you know? What about me do you know? Should I tell you what kind of person I am? Back in present day, the Ziploc bag with her husband's watch in it is in Chae-Won's hands, and she doesn't understand what it was doing there to begin with. She lies to the police officer who had handed her the watch that it is indeed hers. Meanwhile, Hyunsoo, who is residing in a bed and breakfast hotel at the moment, sees the taxi pull up. The owner of the hotel knocks on his bedroom door and his hotel room door, not bedroom door, and asks if he ordered a taxi. No, I didn't, but I needed a cab ride anyway, so maybe I'll go and ask. He leaves the hotel, gets into the taxi, and Kyung-chun, the taxi driver, says, I really wanted to meet you. How did you manage to stay hidden so well? What do you want? And this is when Hyunsoo's phone rings. He cuts the call and Kyung-chun shoots him a look before saying, Chung-mi-suk. I don't know who this Chung-mi-suk is. Oh dear, you don't know? I'm starting to feel sorry for Seung-gil. He ended up dying for no reason. And Hyunsoo's phone rings again and Kyung-chun gets irritated. Either pick that up or turn your phone off. Hyunsoo decides it's better to answer. The phone call is from Mujin. He figured out who Mi-suk is, or rather who Mi-suk was. Mujin had gone to the local doctor to get his head checked, and there he was thinking out loud. Chung-mi-suk. Chung-mi-suk. Mi-suk. Chung-mi-suk. I've heard that name before, and the doctor who's treating him speaks up. Chung-mi-suk? Isn't it that woman? The woman whose body was never found? Gosh, I'm scared to even talk about it. And Moojin remembers the last victim of Do Min-seok. Once he's done getting all stitched up, he calls Hyun-soo to tell him about this. I know who Min-seok is. She's the last victim who was killed by Min-seok. Don't you get it? The culprit is her husband. Where are you right now? On the other side of the line, Kyung-chun pulls out the photo that he had taken from Kdrama Bunok's house, the one where Hyun-soo is taking a walk with the pregnant Chae-Won, before motioning him to be quiet. So Hyun-soo does what he does best and tells Moojin that it's none of his business before hanging up. I bet your baby's pretty big now. Is it a daughter or a son? You're on the run for committing murder, but you're married with a kid? Hyun-soo grabs the photo out of Kyung-chun's hands and rips it to pieces. I had nothing to do with Min-seok's murders, but let me know if you want compensation. Who knows, we might be able to compromise on. But Hyun-soo never gets to finish his sentence because Kyung-chun pulls out a handkerchief and covers Hyun-soo's mouth and nose with it. He's basically trying to chloroform the shit out of Hyun-soo. After a really intense struggle, Hyun-soo manages to pull out the piece of glass that he had originally put in his pant pocket, and he stabs Kyung-chun in the thigh with it, and then punches him in the face before getting out of the car. He looks around frantically when he sees a little metal bin with a fire in it a couple feet away. He stumbles over it, throws the pieces of the pictures into it, and by this point, Kyung-chun has removed the glass shard from his thigh and is now making his way towards Hyun-soo. He grabs Hyun-soo by the collar, pushes him into the ground, and starts punching him. He then gets his chloroform handkerchief out and once again smothers Hyun-soo with it, but this time he succeeds. Hyun-soo loses consciousness. Kyung-chun drags Hyun-soo's limp body into his taxi and fails to notice two things. The first thing is that the owner of the bread and breakfast hotel had seen the taxi driver dragging Hyun-soo into his car. And the second is that Hyun-soo's phone had fallen out of his pocket and is now lying on the floor next to the fire. The owner of the hotel immediately calls the police to report the incident, and Chae-Won, who's still in shock because of the watch, hears the radio in the cop car. A taxi driver is assaulting a passenger in front of the inn by the fishing place. We need backup. Back at the police station, the chief of the Kangsu station, Sang-pil, is angry as hell at Detective Chae. He's walking into the station with Woo-chul right next to him. What? A criminal wiretapped the police station? Why don't you just go ask criminals to catch criminals? This is so humiliating. What about the press? I'm gonna kill that punk and get arrested today. Woo-chul tries to calm Sang-pil down and says that they'll have to deal with the press tomorrow morning. And Sang-pil gets a glance of Detective Chae out of the corner of his eye, runs towards him while doing a flying kick. Thankfully, Detective Chae moves out of the way in time and no one gets hurt, but Detective Chae is now also fighting back with words. I solved so many cases until now. How could you be like this just because I made one mistake? What? A mistake? You can't afford to make a mistake. You're a cop. Sang-pil then grabs Detective Chae by his hair, and of course, Detective Chae can't just let himself be treated like this, so he too grabs Sang-pil by his hair. Their hair-pulling fight only ends when Woo-chul screams, "That's enough! We need to catch Park Hyung-chun tonight. Tomorrow morning, we're going to be all over the news. If we want to save at least a little bit of face, we need to at least have the culprit arrested." So, what's your plan? Kyung-chun drives a taxi. I asked the software manufacturing company to give us the vehicle log. We already have his call logs and credit card statements. Team 5 is currently looking into the suspect's family and financial status. The chief warns them that they had better be the ones to catch the bastard, and he can't have them losing Kyung-chun to another police station. Detective Chae begins the process of tracking the taxi and also decides to make a call to Chae-Won. Chae-Won tells him that they, meaning her and Ho-jun, got a report that a civilian was getting kidnapped by a taxi driver, so they're going to check out the lead. And Detective Chae tells him that he'll be able to track Kyung-chun soon, so that they should be ready to head out as soon as possible. They hang up, and this is when Ho-jun starts getting curious. About that watch that the constable found for you. Since when did you carry around an extra watch? I bought it with me to mend the strap, but I forgot that it was in my pocket. I never saw it before. When did you buy it? It looked pretty expensive. It's my husband's. I asked him to give it to me so that I could take it to the repair shop on my way to work. But Chae-Won, earlier you said that it was yours. Why are you obsessing over something so trivial? Now is not the time for that. But Chae-Won, will you stop? What is it? What is your problem? Why are you so curious about a darn watch? That's not what I was gonna say. You're not wearing your seatbelt. Fasten your seatbelt. You Don't even listen to what I was gonna say. Let's take a quick look at what Moojin is doing after he's gotten hung up on. He's still at the hospital where the doctor is treating him like a little kid, and Moojin can't have that. I'm not the same Kim Woo-jin that you used to know. The person you gave stitches to today didn't get the stitches for falling off a cultivator like he did when he was little. I got hurt while trying to catch a murderer. You should know that. And the doctor responds. That man searched all over the neighborhood to find his wife's corpse. I can't believe that he ended up killing someone over it. It's all because he's sick in the mind. The cops need to hurry up and catch Hyunsu. What does Hyunsu have to do with all of this? The cops need to catch him in order to find the body. Why? Gosh, you're being so frustrating. He went around killing people with his dad, so he should know where the body is. Sir, that's what we call witch hunting. The cops already settled the case saying that it was a one-man crime committed by Min-seok. Hyunsu isn't a serial killer. He's just a regular killer. What are you talking about? He did it with his father. You shouldn't punish family members of a criminal. That's not a trend anymore. Seriously, you're educated enough. You shouldn't mislead people like this. Do you really not know that? Oh, you're so frustrating. I'm the one who's frustrated. What is it that I don't know? What don't I know? What? While Moojin is trying to figure out what he doesn't know, Chae-Won and Hojun have arrived at the inn. They show a picture of Kyung-chun to the owner and she nods. Yeah, that's him. He beat up my guest and dragged him away. It was frightening. And Hojun quickly makes a call to Woo-chul to update him. And Chae-Won, who is next to him, asks, did you know the victim? No, he kind of looked like an outsider. He said that he was here just to get away from things. And Chae-Won asks how the victim paid, and she learns that he paid in cash and didn't take a receipt, so they have no way to really identify him. And that's when a phone a couple feet away starts ringing. And to Chae-Won, that is another terrifyingly familiar ringtone. She walks up to the phone and it stops ringing as she stands over it. And instead of turning off like your regular phone would, this phone, this magic phone, opens to the home screen, lighting up. And it's a picture of Eunha, her daughter. And there's only one other person in the world who loves her daughter enough to have her set as his home screen photo. Hojun, who had wrapped up his conversation with Woo-chul, comes back to Chae-Won, and without looking at him, she says, what do I do now? I think the abduction victim is my husband. I don't know what I'm saying either, but this is Hee-sung's phone. And just to double check, she opens up his gallery and it's filled with photos of her, Eunha, and him. Hojun makes another call, but this time he makes one to Detective Choi. But before Hojun can say anything, Detective Choi has news. Kyung-chun is still close to town. Where are you guys? Chae-Won grabs the phone away from Hojun. Can you locate Kyung-chun's cab? What are you waiting for? Get in the car. Chae-Won gets into the driver's seat of the cop car with Hojun in the passenger seat and books it. Detective Choi guides them through the streets, so now they're like right on Kyung-chun's tails. Kyung-chun, who was leisurely driving along with an unconscious Hee-sung in his trunk up until now, sees the police car behind him and he starts breaking all traffic laws. His driving turns erratic and he's trying to run Chae-Won off the road. But when that doesn't work, he picks up this black box, which I want to say is like the receiver for the bug that he placed in the police station, but don't take my word for it. I have actually no idea what he threw at her. But he takes this black box and he throws it at Chae-Won's car. And I guess he's just really good at driving, because even with the speeds that they're going at, the box smashes right into Chae-Won's windshield, breaking it into pieces. Chae-Won's car swerves and they crash into like a roadside of strawberries. Does anyone else ever focus on this when things get destroyed in movies and TV shows? Like in about 95% of Telugu movies, there will be exploding cars, exploding buses, exploding fruit stands, exploding flower stands, and every time I'm like, oh man, that is such a waste. I could have used that car, I could have eaten all those strawberries, I could have used those flowers, and well, it is what it is, I guess. Anyway, Chae-Won apologizes to Hojun. She had completely forgotten that he was in the car with her and is slowly realizing that she's not only putting her life at risk, but also her younger colleague in danger. Meanwhile, back in the village, Moojin is still begging the doctor to let him know what he doesn't know. His begging, though, gets interrupted when a policeman from the Yeonju police station comes in. He's here to speak with the doctor about the break-in, robbery, and assault of the grandma. And before the questioning, the doctor tells Moojin that the reason he's so sure that Min-seok killed with his son is because there's a witness. Woo-jin later goes to drink with the police officer from the Yeonju station, and the two of them get a little bit tipsy, and the police officer says, "I feel like I've talked way too much today. Don't tell me you're using me just to get what you want." "What do you take me for?" And just to prove his point, he takes out his phone. "Here, okay, what else?" "Where did it go? Where's my recorder? I swear I had it in here." The police officer looks at him suspiciously, so Woo-jin gets up and puts his arms out. "Sir, you've got yourself a search warrant. Go ahead and search me all you want." The officer tells him to forget it and says that he'll just make Woo-jin black out so that he doesn't remember anything. He pours Woo-jin another glass of soju, and Woo-jin takes a sip before excusing himself to the bathroom. And in there, he pulls out a pen and starts writing on his arm. May 12th, 2002, 2 a.m. Jon-Gi worked at Cheol-kyu Hotel, and he can't help but think that things are getting interesting. We'll learn more about the witness a bit later, but first let's talk about the victim at the moment. Hee-sung/Hyun-soo wakes up in the middle of a dirty and empty pool. Kyung-chun starts talking behind him. Baek Hee-sung. Baek Hee-sung. So Hyun-soo has a driver's license by the name of Baek Hee-sung. I wonder why. You gained a new identity. Who would have imagined, right? A serial killer changed his identity, got married, and even had a child. And it seems like you regularly trimmed your hair. Hyun-soo looks him straight in the eyes before saying, "Should I make you more jealous? I own a 2-story house in Seoul. It's mine. Although the bank owns more of it at the moment." And then he starts laughing. It's just pathetic. The one you wanted revenge on died, so his son Hyun-soo seemed like the perfect target to excrete all of that anger you were yet to unleash. He's just like his father. He's been possessed by an evil spirit. He was in a mental institution. He's soulless. The two of them only kept to themselves. He was aware of his father's crimes. They were accomplices. Isn't that it? Huh. You're just as I heard. You're not scared of anything. Kyung-chun starts stroking Hyun-soo's face with a knife that he had in his hand. I could kill you in a heartbeat, you know? An opponent who I can see through? Why would I be scared of him? It's kind of boring. Kyung-chun has heard enough. He forces the knife into Hyun-soo's ribs before saying, "But you still feel pain. I'll torture you until you tell me what I want to know. Tell me, where is Misuk?" Hyun-soo mumbles something and Kyung-chun perks up. "What did you say?" And he puts his ear closer to Hyun-soo's mouth, and then he feels a searing pain on his ear. Hyun-soo had bitten his ear. He starts struggling and he manages to get away from Hyun-soo, but he loses a part of his ear in the process. Hyun-soo spits out a piece of the ear that he managed to bite out before saying, "Revenge? You'll fail miserably. Killing me would be such a big failure, and so will severing my limbs, as well as putting holes in my body, because you can't possibly prove what I didn't do, or what I didn't even know about. Understand? What you'll do to me is obvious. However, how that will ruin you is what intrigues me the most. So show me." While Hyun-soo is getting tortured and biting people's ears off, his wife is talking to Detective Choi. Jae-sop is Detective Choi's first name. So Chae-Won is talking to Jae-sop/Detective Choi. "Jae-sop, I think it's my husband. I don't know why. I have no idea, but I think my husband is who he abducted. Right now, I have no answers. I don't even know why Hee-sung was at the inn. The owner said that he was on vacation. Jae-sop, what should I do? Give me an order. I need at least something. If I don't do anything, I might completely lose it." Chae-Won, calm down. How am I supposed to calm down? An abduction means that he had a place to take his victim. He's a taxi driver, abandoned factories, buildings, and all the residential areas that are being redeveloped. He knows all of them. There are hundreds of places he could be. We'll pinpoint the location once we have his routes. Once we have them, of course, yes, you'll find the place along with my dismembered husband. Jae-sop, it's my husband I need to find, not Kyung-chun. Alive as well. You saw how Kyung-chun killed Sung-gil. Chae-Won, we're doing our best. You of all people know that. You've handled your fair share of culprits like him. You were the one who caught the Chuodong kidnapper last year. Even before we had a suspect, you followed him everywhere to find evidence. I'm sure that these men have certain habits, Detective Choi. Rather than just sitting around, there must be something we can do. I need you to think. And Detective Choi starts thinking. Why? What made me suspect him? Why? Yes, I remember now. You two meet me at Kyung-chun's house right now. As Detective Chae is figuring out where Hee-sung is, Woo-chul is informing Hee-sung's parents about the abduction. The mom is restless while asking about her son, who took him, and Woo-chul tells them that we're certain it was the suspect of the Chinese restaurant murder case, and we're conducting our search. What does that have to do with Hee-sung? Why on earth did he abduct our son? Have you heard of the name Hyun-soo? And almost immediately after he mentions Hyun-soo, the mom says she's never heard that name before. The strangely quick response raises some eyebrows, but Woo-chul continues. Hyun-soo has been on the run ever since he was suspected of killing the village foreman 18 years ago in Yeonju City. Do you perhaps remember the serial killings that took place there? Again, the mom really quickly says, no, I don't. And at this point, Woo-chul is starting to think that something is off, but the dad saves the situation. I think I vaguely remember, and Woo-chul explains. Hyun-soo is the son of the serial killer, Min-suk, and the mom once again shakily asks, so what? What does Hyun-soo have to do with any of this? The guy who abducted your son has only one target. It's Hyun-soo. It looks like he was trying to frame Hyun-soo for murder so that the police will start looking for him, and we're guessing that's why your son got abducted. So what is this person planning on doing with Hyun-soo? But before Woo-chul can answer the question, the dad says, honey, let's leave the case to the detectives. Woo-chul reassures them that their highest priority is to rescue their son, and also tells them that he'll be leaving some police on standby outside of their house for protection. He leaves the house, and after the front door closes, he tells his partner in crime, that the conversation went a lot easier than he had expected. Normally, when someone gets abducted, it's very hard to have a conversation with the victim's family. They beg us to save and rescue their child and get angry at us for not doing a better job. These parents seemed more concerned in the case than they did about the well-being of their son. Well, we're not their family, so it's hard to know what kind of relationship they have with their son. Inside the house, the mom and dad are sitting in the living room, and the mom is ranting. What in the world has he been doing? What did I tell you? I told you it's better to just have him live with us. That wouldn't have changed much. We know what we were getting ourselves into when we took him in, despite his shady background. The culprit knew Hee-sung was Hyun-soo. The mom bites her nails before getting up and heading over to the secret room where the real Baek Hee-sung is still lying there unconscious. The dad follows after her, and when the mom asks what they should do, because the moment the culprit gets caught, people will find out that Hyun-soo lived as Hee-sung and that both of them will get put in jail. She's worried that if something happens to the two of them, there will be no one there to care for her unconscious son. The dad holds her hand and says, the culprit will kill Hyun-soo. Listen to me carefully. If Hyun-soo dies, we will be the only ones who know the truth. We'll be just a pitiful couple who got used by him because he knew our weakness. We'll just say that we didn't know anything. We didn't know that he was a serial murderer's son or that he was a wanted criminal for a murder case. We'll just say that we didn't even know that he was Hyun-soo. People will come around and understand us. I can find some holes in that argument, but let's see if Hyun-soo will actually die for that excuse to even have a chance at working. At the abandoned pool, Kyung-chun has placed Hyun-soo up against the pool wall, and he has his hands also tied to these metal handles that are on the pool ground, and he's also turned the water on. How long do you think you have until your lungs turn into a pair of water balloons? The good news is that you still have a chance to change yourself. I told you I can't tell you something I don't know. May 12th, 2002. It was a Sunday and the weather was beautiful. It was the kind of day that made you want to go outside for a picnic or a date. What did you do that day? That was when Mi-suk disappeared. It was a black SUV and the license plate number was 3194. Mi-suk was in that car on the day she disappeared. I'm sure you know very well because that was your father's car. It was 2:30 a.m. at the Sehyundong intersection. The witness memorized the license plate number and called the cops. And Min-suk got investigated, but he got acquitted because his son made sure his father had a solid alibi. If Min-suk got arrested that day, Mi-suk wouldn't have died. That was the last chance to save Mi-suk. Hyun-soo defends himself. I just told them the truth. I was with my dad starting from the morning of that day until the next morning. I told them where we were and my statement always remained the same. If you are telling the truth, then that means that Min-suk's car went around abducting people on its own, because that's pretty common, right? The witness was drunk and she changed her statement. Why are you leaving that out? My statement stayed consistent, but the witness changed what she said. She told the cops that she can't remember. Killing me won't complete your imagination. In response, Kyung-chun pulls out his phone that has a little wooden rectangle with the golden fish and the black scales painted on it, and Hyun-soo is shocked when he sees it, and Kyung-chun relights the conversation. Looks familiar, doesn't it? Mi-seok had the same one, but Sun-kil told me that this belonged to you. Why? Why are you suddenly so silent? Tell me, why do you have something that Mi-seok had on her the day before she went missing? Who could it be? And Hyun-soo freezes. We get a little flashback to his father's funeral. The room was completely empty, and I'm sure it's because everybody hated him at this point. Hyun-soo had fallen asleep while listening to something on his Walkman when his sister, Hae-soo, woke him up to hand him a small piece of wood with a golden fish with black scales painted on it. A goldfish brings you good luck. Keep it on you at all times. Hyun-soo had taken it back then, and that's why it was in his possession to begin with. His sister at the moment is getting hounded by the press. She lives on this rooftop room, and the press are banging on her door asking about Hyun-soo. Miss Toisu, I'd like an interview, please. The people have the right to know. Hyun-soo is back in the spotlight. Some of them suspect that you're helping your brother escape. Hae-soo peeks out from behind her curtains and then realizes that the swarm probably isn't going to go away, but maybe, just maybe, they'll go away if she made a statement. She opens the door just a little bit. Please leave. I don't know anything. When Min-seok was committing the murders, you were 19. Did you really not know that your father was a serial killer? No, I didn't. And after it was revealed that your father was a serial killer and your brother fled after killing the village foreman, you entered a art school, a very prestigious art school at that. Please say a word to the victims' families. She apologizes and attempts to close the door when one of the reporters catches the door. Wait, if you're not helping Hyun-soo flee, why don't you show your face proudly? I can tell that you're pretty. She shoots him a glare before apologizing once again and closing her door. She peeks out of her curtains again and she can hear the reporters talking outside. She doesn't seem very sorry. She is pretty though. A couple blocks away, Detective Chae, Chae-Won, and Ho-jun are at Kyung-chun's apartment. Detective Chae tells the other two that the reason he was so fixated on the culprit in the Chua-tong kidnapping case was because he lived in a town. The culprit lived in a town that was being redeveloped. But his door lock was way too fancy. It was obviously recently installed. And he was moving out soon, but the door lock had an auto lock feature and a fingerprint scanner. Kyung-chun would have needed a lock as well to keep his hideout secure. They all get to work upheaving the apartment to find anything about a locksmith. Chae-Won starts going through his trash, and in there she finds a ripped up advertisement for a locksmith. They get the smith on the phone, and thankfully he remembered the exact address. He just thought it was weird that Kyung-chun needed a door lock because he knew that construction in that building had stopped for a while. They get into their cars and start heading towards this abandoned building. Meanwhile, Kyung-chun is still questioning Hyun-soo about the piece of wood. Explain it to me. How did something that belonged to Mi-seok get into your possession? Why? Why can't you say anything? You are yapping up until now without batting an eye. So why? Why can't you explain this to me? Tell me, where is Mi-seok? Just tell me where you buried her, then I'll let you live. You were born into this world as a human being, so you should live as one at least for one moment. Don't you agree? In that dark, damp, and cold place, she's waiting for me to get her out. She must be so anxious. Please tell me, I beg you, please. Hyun-soo, who at this point is straining his neck to keep his nose above the water, can only say, "It wasn't me." And then his face gets submerged by the water. Outside, Chae-Won and Detective Chae and Ho-jun have arrived. Chae-Won runs into the building, and Detective Chae tells Ho-jun to stay outside and call for backup before rushing in with her. Inside the building, there's a door with a shiny new lock. Chae-Won tries to twist the knob and bangs on the door before she gets pushed aside by Detective Chae, who has found a hammer nearby. He breaks the lock, and Chae-Won rushes to the only other door inside this room. And as soon as she opens the door, Kyung-chun attacks her with a knife. She pushes him off where Detective Chae takes care of him while Chae-Won goes to find her husband. She sees the water in the pool running and is worried when she sees her husband unconscious underwater. She jumps in and tries to lift him out of the water, but quickly realizes that he's kind of tied up. She can't undo the ropes, so instead she resurfaces, takes a deep breath, and then tries to transfer her breath to him. She does this a couple more times until he regains consciousness. And as he stares at her, his voice narrates, "Should I tell you what kind of person I am?" And if this sounds familiar, it's because this is the opening scene of the drama. But this time we're taken back to that spring night where Chae-Won had asked for the piggyback ride. I never graduated high school. I had a hard time adjusting. I was even in a gang once. Back then, I spent all my time getting into fights. Have you ever punched a person before? Chae-Won shakes her head no. I've punched a guy to the point where I wasn't even aware of my scraped knuckles. It actually felt good. Also, I see things that I shouldn't. I'm not normal in the head. He once again looks to his left behind Chae-Won, and there he is again, his father. Chae-Won asks, "What exactly do you see?" "A dead person." "He must have loved that person. My dead grandma popped into my dreams once." "Grandma, you can go now. Stop worrying about me and rest in peace." She heard me and walked away. Hyunsu stares at her, amused. "You really are quite dense. You feel bad because you have nothing to offer me?" And Hyunsu argues, "I don't know how to feel that way. You only have one problem. You don't see yourself in the same way I see you. I'll like you a lot from here on out. I'll be really good to you. Then one day, things will change for you. Like a lie." "Unbelievable. You're doing it again with that gaze. My heart just skipped a beat. But still, you say that you don't feel the same about me?" "You're a mystery to me, Chae-Won." Chae-Won stands up. "Does that mean you like me? The mood couldn't be better and there's nothing more to say, so let's kiss." And she places her lips on his, and he doesn't move away like she had expected. Instead, he closes his eyes for a second, and then when he opens them, he looks his father straight into his eyes and thinks, "Father, you can go now. I want to stay here, so please, please go." And for the first time in his life, his father turns around and walks away. Chae-Won backs away and starts saying something about getting drinks, but he really doesn't care. Instead, he grabs her head and kisses her again. Back in present day, Chae-Won can see that he's still alive, so she gets out of the water and starts looking for something to help her untie him. She sees a knife holding up a piece of paper on the wall. She grabs it, jumps back into the water, and cuts the ropes around Hee-sun's arms, dragging him out of the water. She starts performing CPR while screaming for help. She has tears streaming down her face, and Hee-sun, who had gained just a little bit of consciousness, thinks, "I always thought that I was lucky to have met you, but for the first time, I'm thinking you should have never met me." For the first time in his life, he knows what it feels like to feel sorry for somebody. Now, you might be thinking, why is no one else rushing in to help when Chae-Won is screaming her head off? That's because there's some shit going on outside. Detective Chae had managed to pin Kyung-chun to the ground, and he started taking out his handcuffs while listing Kyung-chun's Miranda rights. But Kyung-chun took this opportunity to grab a knife, like somewhere in his pocket, and he stabs Detective Chae on the side of his stomach. Kyung-chun gets up to run away, but Ho-jun rushes inside, and he sees Detective Chae bleeding on the ground. He gets out his gun, aiming it at Kyung-chun. In a panic, Kyung-chun goes to where Detective Chae is and places the knife against Detective Chae's neck. He lifts Detective Chae up and demands that Ho-jun move out of the way, otherwise he'll kill the detective. Detective Chae tells Ho-jun to just do it, just shoot. Shoot him, just shoot. When he realizes that Ho-jun isn't going to shoot, he gathers all of his remaining strength and pushes back, basically causing himself and Kyung-chun to take a bunch of steps backward until Kyung-chun hits a wall. But they don't hit just any wall. This particular wall had a bunch of piping and bolts that were exposed. Kyung-chun's head had smashed into one of the bolts and he collapses to the ground. Let's go back to the night that Sung-gil tried to kill Hyunsu. It was raining heavily and this man is seen driving while on the phone with somebody. "Yes, I'm on my way." "No, of course not. Thanks for asking though. No matter how difficult it is, I have to face this by myself." "So, how did she seem to you?" "I'm glad." During this conversation, he wasn't really paying attention to the road in front of him, which is a really bad idea because 1, it's dark, and 2, it's raining really badly. So when Hyunsu appeared from the forest, this man ran into him. But it's not going to just be a hit and run. This man gets out of his car and he approaches Hyunsu. "Sir, are you all right?" Hyunsu doesn't say anything, so the man pulls out his phone saying that he'll call an ambulance, but Hyunsu uses the little strength he has left to knock the phone out of the man's hand and says, "No, hospitals. But today, after Chae-Won saved him from Kyung-chun, he doesn't really have a choice to not go to the hospital. He's in the ER getting shocked to restart his heart, and while his heart is stopped, the person on Hyun-soo's mind is his sister, Hae-soo. He thinks back to their childhood where they were just kids happy to be alive, how a simple metal sculpture would make them smile when a small walk was all they needed to have fun. Then he sees her to his side with blood on one side of her face, and he thinks to her, Hae-soo, live a normal life. Never look for me. I won't live as Hyun-soo anymore. He relives his whole life during these moments, being bullied by Moojin, the village people dragging him to perform an exorcism on him, the night where Seung-gil tried to kill him, and finally getting hit by the car. The next thing he knows, he's in a hospital room shaking from his memories. His whole body is in pain, but he forces himself to get up. He yanks the IV needle from his arm, looking pretty panicked. He tries to get off the bed to run away, but as soon as he puts pressure on his legs, they buckle underneath him and he falls to the ground. And it takes him a bit to remember how to walk properly again. So he's probably been in the hospital for quite a few days. He makes it out of his VIP hospital room when he bumps into a police officer. The police officer sees him and makes a report into his little walkie-talkie that the patient is awake. Hyun-soo stops in his tracks and turns around to try to go the other way, to get away from the police, when the police officer says, Hyun-soo. The officer approaches Hyun-soo, takes a hold of his arm, and says, "It's all over now, Hyun-soo." Hyun-soo has half the mind to run, but the officer speaks up again. "Are you all right, sir? Let me escort you back to your room." "This way, sir." Hyun-soo had imagined that the police officer had found out about his identity. But instead of going back into the room, Hyun-soo pushes the officer to the side and starts running. He enters this really long hallway when he sees Chae-Won rushing in his direction. They both stop when they see each other before Chae-Won comes up to him and wraps herself around him. She starts crying, and after staying still for a couple moments, he hugs her back and says, "It's all right, Chae-Won. I'm all right." Meanwhile, Moojin has been keeping himself busy these days. Now that he's found out about the witness, he's going to do everything in his power to get her to do an interview with him. "Can you please meet me just this one time? I'm near your place of work." "Okay, can you answer just this one question then? On May 12th, 2002, is it true that you were a witness to Miss Chung Mi-suk getting abducted?" "Hello? Hello?" The witness had hung up on him. At this point, he's in this town square area, and there's a TV playing the news behind him about the Park Kyung-chun case. Park Kyung-chun, the Hosindong Chinese murder killer, was revealed as a family member of Miss Chung Mi-suk, a victim of the Yeonju City serial murder case. The taxi driver brutally murdered Mr. Nam in the Chinese restaurant he ran. His crimes didn't stop there, though. He abducted another one of his passengers, Mr. Peck, and held him captive while inflicting bodily harm. Questions are being raised as to why he committed such crimes and his relationship to the victims. The police have stated that they're investigating the motive behind the culprit's criminal acts. Moojin isn't the only one listening to the news, though. Hyun-soo's fake mom, who is driving to the hospital, is also hearing it on the radio. At the hospital, Hyun-soo is surrounded by a bunch of doctors and Chae-Won's mom, so his mother-in-law, and Eun-ha. The doctor in charge is debriefing all the other doctors in the room about the situation. Paek Hee-sung, 39 years old. He was found and brought to the ER 10 days ago due to cardiac arrest. He had a cardiac arrest for about 8 minutes and he was given hypothermic treatment. For 2 days straight, his body temperature was held at 34 degrees Celsius. Hyun-soo interrupts to ask what hypothermic treatment is, and the doctor explains that he can think about it kind of like animals in hibernation. Their energy is conserved and their metabolism is slowed down during their hibernating state. They quickly lowered his body temperature and metabolism to prevent his cells from getting damaged. They tell him that he might experience fuzzy memories or memory loss, so they're going to ask him a couple of questions. "Can you tell us your name and your birthday?" "I was born March 15th, 1982. My name is Paek Hee-sung." "What is your wife's name?" "Chae-Won." "And your daughter?" "Daughter? I have a daughter?" Eun-ha comes up to him crying, asking why he doesn't remember her, and the doctors are trying to explain that memories sometimes come back in reverse order, so this is totally normal. But then Hee-sung smiles the biggest smile and picks up Eun-ha. Baek Eun-ha. She's 6 years old. She was born in September 2015 and she goes to Small Bird Kindergarten. Everyone in the room laughs at the joke when the dad walks in. So Hyun-soo got taken to the hospital that his fake dad is a director at. The rest of the doctors leave the room and Chae-Won's mom turns to the dad and says that he must have been worried about his son. The dad smiles before saying, "He no longer needs to depend on those heartless machines. I have nothing more to ask now." He turns to Hyun-soo. "How do you feel? Does anything bother you?" Hyun-soo says that he's fine, and that's when his mom bursts into the room in a fit of rage. "What in the world have you been up to? Do you think your life is yours now?" The dad stops her, pointing out that Chae-Won's mother is here, and the mom stares at Chae-Won's mom. "You should have informed us if you were coming." Chae-Won's mom looks like she's going to say something, but Chae-Won interrupts. "I'm sorry, I was thoughtless." The mom ignores Chae-Won's apology and asks Chae-Won's mom again, "Will you please excuse us? I'd like to be with my family." And Chae-Won's mom is furious. "No one here is a stranger, we're all family." But Chae-Won interrupts and takes her mom and Eun-ha out of the room. She closes the door behind them, but she doesn't move away. Instead, she stares through the small window on the door, looking at what the three of them are doing. She only moves away when her mom calls to her. Chae-Won walks them to the elevator, and when her mom is about to leave, Chae-Won asks her mom to stay. She just wants to spend a little more time with her. Her mom hugs her and says, "He just needs to be discharged. Everything will be fine from now on. You should come home for dinner. I'll cook you your braised short ribs with ripe kimchi, your favorite." She then gets into the elevator, leaving Chae-Won to her thoughts, but not for too long because Ho-jun calls her. Back in the hospital, Hyun-soo is reassuring the parents, "Don't worry about Chae-Won, I'll take care of it." And the mom questions, "Wouldn't she be suspicious of why you were there to begin with?" Min-suk's shop is still in that neighborhood. I told her that I followed reporter Kim there to get ideas about my own work. And how can we trust reporter Kim? I know his weakness. And the mom perks up at that. What is that? But Hyun-soo doesn't tell them. They don't need to know. "Do you not trust us?" And Hyun-soo throws back, "How much do you trust me?" The dad interrupts. "Let's stop talking about what's unnecessary. Our current problem is Kyung-chun." When reminded about Kyung-chun, the mom again starts freaking out because the man is a ticking time bomb. And the dad has to remind her, "Honey, did you forget what happened to us 15 years ago because of your temper? Did you forget why we're suddenly all nervous about Kyung-chun? This is too much for you to handle. You should go home. I'm saying this for your sake. I know how useless I am. I know that very well." And the mom walks out of the room. Outside the hospital, Ho-jun rushes up to Chae-Won, who is sitting on a bench. "Chae-Won, I am so happy for you. I really am. I'm so excited right now." "You look more excited than me. Do you know how worried I was? I really thought something might happen to you." And we get a glimpse of what the last few days have looked like for Chae-Won. She would spend hours watching Hyun-soo, and every day she would suddenly rush up to a doctor and say, "Why isn't he waking up? You raised his body temperature, but why isn't he waking up? Can't you go check on him? I haven't seen him like this. He didn't even move a finger or twitch an eyebrow. It doesn't look like he's sleeping. He's laying there like a doll. It just seems so strange. Can you please just take a look at him?" Ho-jun had watched Chae-Won become duller and duller each day, so he's confused about her reaction right now. "I thought you'd dance once Hee-sung woke up. Instead, it looks like you're worried about something." Chae-Won changes the topic to Kyung-chun, and Ho-jun tells her it's insane. They're deciding on his detention warrant tomorrow. I think he's faking it to avoid being locked up. The doctors say that they couldn't find any problems that would affect his cognitive skills, but his body is very weak, probably due to cancer, so they can't say. The police are asking the hospital for cooperation. And do you guys remember how there was a scene that they showed us at one point where at the warehouse, the masked killer at that point, which we didn't know about, Kyung-chun had collapsed to the ground and started coughing up blood. But it turns out that he actually has cancer. As to whether the hospital will be cooperating, that will be up to Hyun-soo. His dad is debriefing him on the situation. They'll decide on Kyung-chun's detention warrant tomorrow. The doctor's assessment will be disadvantageous to us. There's a good chance he'll be locked up tomorrow. This means we must do something tonight. Do you want to give it a shot? His body is already addicted to narcotic painkillers, so much that medically it wouldn't be strange if he had a heart attack, and he has no family that would request an autopsy. If you say you'll do it, I can help you. And you can't do it yourself? The dad doesn't say anything. He just kind of looks at Hyun-soo, and after staring back for a couple seconds, Hyun-soo says that he'll think about it. The dad gets up, and before he leaves, he tells Hyun-soo that tonight is their only chance. Hyun-soo then gets a call from Moojin, and Moojin is amazed. "You are amazing. Are you really alive? I really thought you'd die this time. You're just so healthy." Chae-Won says that you haven't gone to the police to give your statement yet. "Yeah, I've been saying I'm busy and I was avoiding them. We haven't gotten our stories straight yet." "Good job. Listen carefully to what I'm about to say." "Okay, I got it. So you and I, yes, it was a coincidence. I'm not stupid. I said I got it. Why are you making me repeat it?" He doesn't give Hyun-soo a chance to say anything else because during the entirety of their phone call, he was waiting outside of a woman's bathroom for someone, and the woman he was waiting for finally comes out. It's an older woman who is working on cleaning the bathrooms, and when she exits the bathroom, she sees Moojin's face, and she turns around and heads into the men's bathroom to try and escape Moojin's questioning. But he just follows her, and she's starting to get annoyed. And she says, "I really have nothing for you." "Come on, yes you do. Jung-Gi, you're the last person to see Chung Mi-suk alive. Just tell me exactly what you saw 18 years ago. That's all." "I don't know. How can I remember something from 18 years ago? You called it in." "I was mistaken. You know about the recent Kyung-chun case, don't you? Mi-suk is Kyung-chun's wife. If the cops had investigated properly when you had called them, they could have saved her." Young-hee pulls out her phone and she shows Moojin a photo of a high school girl. "This is my daughter. I just want to live a quiet life providing for my daughter." "Miss Chung, you seem to be mistaken. I'm not trying to harass you. I'm just trying to prove that the police were being negligent." "Listen, stop coming. Just ignore me. What if that monster hurts my daughter for talking? Min-suk died years ago, not him." And she freezes. She messed up. Moojin starts pleading with her to tell him about who she's talking about, but she doesn't answer him. Back at the hospital, Hojin manages to convince Hyun-soo to give a statement, of course with Chae-Won's permission. Hojin and Chae-Won go upstairs. While Hojin sets up the camera, Chae-Won is talking to Hyun-soo. "Are you sure that you can do it? Are you confident?" Hyun-soo smiles and says, "This requires confidence." He then reaches his hand out to Chae-Won's face, but she flinches. She's never done that before. He tries again, and this time she doesn't jump away, so he removes a piece of dust from her hair. "Why are you so jumpy? See, you got something on you. Why are you so nervous?" Chae-Won tries to play it off like it's nothing, and Hyun-soo for some reason thinks back to Chae-Won's crying face when she had pulled him out of the water. Hojin interrupts their moment to say that he put together some questions to make the statement easier for Hyun-soo when the room door slams open. It's Detective Choi. He's dragging his little IV stand with him, but he's alive and well after the stabbing. "Hey there, me, I'm fine. I know you've all been worried crazy about me, but really I'm fine. So don't visit me going forward as you haven't been up until now." He's sulking that none of his teammates actually came to visit him when he was recovering from the stab wound. Hyun-soo tries to relieve the tension in the room by apologizing. "It's been a while. I heard you were hurt, but I was unable to go visit you." "You've been through a lot," he sung, "but seeing how wrecked Kyung-chun was, you were pretty rough on him. Did you fight a lot while you were young?" Hojin tells him off, and that's when Detective Choi sees the papers that Hojin is holding. "What is that? A questionnaire?" Detective Choi looks at him like he's an amateur. Since when does a cop hand out questionnaires? And then he sits down behind the camera. Detective Choi is personally going to question Hyun-soo. "Shall we begin? I'm itching to work. Let's begin. Mr. Paek Hee-sung, why did Park Hyung-chun torture you instead of killing you immediately? Torturing someone is the most extreme measure taken to get an answer from somebody. That intrigues me the most. What question did Park Hyung-chun have for Paek Hee-sung?" At Detective Choi's questions, Chae-Won gets anxious and says, "What are you doing? You're asking a victim a loaded question. Don't try too hard to answer that. If you don't want to, or you don't know, or you can't remember, just say so." And Detective Choi interrupts. "Chae-Won, if you're going to be a cop, sit next to me. If you're going to help him with this statement, sit next to him and don't speak out of turn. Decide where you'll sit so I can do my job." Hyun-soo tells her that it's okay, but Chae-Won decides that it's better for her to stay outside, and she leaves the room. When the door closes, Hyun-soo answers, "While trying to persuade Kyung-chun, I told him that there was a cop that worked in my family. He took out his anger on me for the cops not finding his wife back then. I passed out after being stabbed in the arm, and when I woke up, I was submerged in water from the chest down. You see, that's another thing that I'm really curious about. Why did Kyung-chun not kill you in the way he killed Seung-gil, but took his time trying to drown you instead? Hee-sung says that he's curious about that too, and Ho-jin has an idea. If the police had been about 5 minutes or a little bit later, we wouldn't have been able to save him. The guilt would have stayed with us forever, and maybe that's what he was after because Kyung-chun hates the police. Detective Chae raises an eyebrow at this. Gosh, I guess you're right. How perceptive of you. What are you, Park Kyung-chun's lawyer? How would you know what he was thinking? And by saying this, Detective Chae finds himself in a bit of a pickle because Hyun-soo says, right? Only Kyung-chun knows what Kyung-chun was thinking. There's no way for me to know either. So could you please ask questions that I can answer for you, Detective Chae? So you, Mr. Peck, went to the village with reporter Kim, who you by chance happened to get acquainted to. Then you by chance happened to get into Mr. Park's cab, and then was by chance chosen as his kidnap victim, right? Is that a question? Call it a doubt of sorts. Detective Chae, do you dislike me? What? Why would you ask that? I'm very fond of Chae-Won, you know that. I know everything. When Chae-Won first introduced me to you, you welcomed me like a brother, but then told Chae-Won to break up with me behind my back, because I'm bad news apparently. Did I do something to get on your bad side? If so, please let me know and I'll try to apologize. Hee-sung, there's something I've learned in my life. As you can see, I'm not very likable, which is why only 3 types of people try to get on my good side. A liar, a potential liar, or one in the middle of lying. So what you mean to say is that even though you're extremely biased towards me, Detective Chae, you're here to take my statement. Detective Im, I think it's much better if you took my statement. And Detective Im is Ho-jin. Detective Chae stands up. Sure, it's not like my specialty lies with victims anyway. Just wait until Kyung-chun is arrested. And he leaves the room, allowing Ho-jin to do the questioning. In the hospital lobby, Chae-Won gets a phone call from Seung-gil's wife. I'd like to start by thanking you. Thank you for catching the killer. Seung-gil can finally rest in peace now. I'm calling though for another reason. There's something I think you should know. I have information regarding Hyun-soo. I called you in the hopes that it might be useful, but I really can't say it over the phone, so could we perhaps meet before I go to my parents' house next week? I'll come to you once I wrap up the case. Also, I was wondering if you could only tell me about the information you have on Hyun-soo? Yes, of course, I'll do that. I want you to be the one who gets the credit for this case. They hang up, and Chae-Won's attention is caught by the news playing on the TV behind her. With the Hosindon Chinese restaurant murder case turning out to be a tragedy connected to the Yeonju serial murder case, many are now shifting their focus on to Do Min-suk, the man who began it all. The notorious serial killer and his son, who is still missing, lived here in this workshop. As you can see, the structure is still intact. Spiderwebs droop on the walls while creepy crafted items roll around on the floor. Anyone would call it haunted. The basement of the warehouse next to the workshop is where the victims were held captive. Let's take a look there too. This is the basement where Min-suk held his victims captive. It's as if I'm in a dungeon several meters below ground. I'm already having a hard time breathing. Chae-Won looks like she's on the brink of tears watching this, and to make it worse, the reporter finds a huge cage in the basement. I see this huge cage. Let me walk in it myself. Wow, even though I'm a fit, grown man, I feel powerless in here. He then finds something in the cage. He picks it up and shows it to the camera. This looks like a cable tie that he bound his victims with. 18 years have passed since that incident, but traces of the nightmare are still intact in this basement. Hyun-soo is sitting in his room alone, thinking about how Detective Chae questioned him when he sees his door opening and Chae-Won entering. He stands up looking pretty excited to see her. I did well on my statement. When she gives him a small smile and doesn't say anything else, he starts getting concerned. What is it? Is something wrong? It's nothing. Ho-jin said that you did well. Good job. No, it's not nothing. You seem worried about something. What is it? Tell me. By this point, she has tears rolling down her eyes, but she's still denying that something is wrong. Chae-Won, you should head home and maybe get some rest. You seem exhausted. How could I possibly go home and rest? How could I sleep at home in a situation like this? You almost died in front of my eyes. That was only 10 days ago. You were touch and go for 10 days. Do you have any idea how devastated I was? Do you? My legs gave in every time I got a call. Why is someone calling me? Why do they need to speak to me so urgently? During the 10 seconds it took me to see who was calling, I almost suffocated myself by holding my breath. And you want me to go home and get some sleep? Every time I went home to an empty house, I was worried that I might really be left all alone. Do you know how much that scared me? You'll never know how traumatizing and tormenting the past 10 days have been for me. You'll never know that. But on the other hand, you've been... How could you... How... I should go. She turns around to leave, but Hyun-soo desperately grabs her arm. Let's talk. About what? Anything is fine. You can talk about whatever and I'll just sit and listen. Chae-Won frees her arm and says, maybe later. I'm suddenly really tired. I just want to go home and get some sleep. And she leaves the room again. She makes it to the stairwell of the hospital before she breaks down crying. And the reason? When Hyun-soo was in the ICU, heavily drugged up, he had opened his eyes for just a single moment. She'd gotten closer to see if he recognized her, but instead he said, "Hae-soo, live a normal life. Never look for me. I won't live as Hyun-soo anymore." Basically, in the very beginning, when we were being shown scenes of what Hyun-soo was thinking about while being resuscitated, he spoke the words that he wanted to say to Hae-soo to Chae-Won instead. Inside the hospital room, Hyun-soo is confused about what just happened, and he's worried that everything that he's built up to this point can be pulled out from underneath him. That Chae-Won will look at him the same way that the rest of the world does. His sister, the one that he wanted to protect, is currently getting fired from her job. Her boss apologizes and tells her that he's having a hard time working with all the reporters that are suddenly showing up around the shooting area. She takes the firing rather gracefully and even thanks him for apologizing. You could have asked me why I didn't tell you anything about my family and gotten angry at me saying that I almost ruined your life. But you didn't do any of that, and for that, I'm grateful. The boss is shocked, asking who would ever act like that, and Hae-soo remembers a young Moo-jin. He had done that to her. He had told her that she should have broken up with him after finding out about her family, that she reminded him of her father, and that she gives him the creeps. Present-day Moo-jin is busy begging the witness to let him inside her house because he really needs to poo. I'm not brazen and I don't lack common sense. It's just that I really need to go to the bathroom. Let me use the bathroom. It'll take just 1 minute. Please, I'm serious. This is about protecting my human rights. I'm not lying. The witness comes out of her house to scold him. My goodness, Mr. Kim, you're invading my privacy. You're seriously crossing the line here. You gave me a huge tip-off saying that Min-seok had an accomplice. How do you expect me not to ask you anything about it? Muster up your courage so that the people can hear the truth. Truth, my foot. Tell me, will you protect me and my daughter if I agree to do this interview? That's when the witness's daughter comes out. Who are you? Why do you keep bothering my mom? If you don't run away from here on the count of 3, I'll call the cops. Moo-jin tries making a few more pleas within that 3 seconds, but when nothing works and the daughter is about to press the call button, he runs away. The mother and daughter head back inside, but the mom looks at Moo-jin's retreating back one more time. It's pretty late into the evening, and after thinking about it for the whole day, Hyun-soo has made his decision. He calls his dad and says, "I'll do it. I think it needs to be done." Chae-Won is back at the police station where she takes out a forensics kit. The kit has a luminol solution, a hydrogen peroxide solution, some latex gloves, and a spray bottle. She heads towards the exit but thinks about something and then heads back to her desk. She opens up the Gyeonggi village foreman murder case file and reads through it again. And in the reports, there is a section with a child consultation record, and it reads, "Name? Hyun-soo, threw puppy into a river, shows severe violence towards mammals, carried out therapy, insensible, expressionless, indifferent, lacks empathy and guilt, shows sign of schizoid personality disorder, requires psychiatric drug treatment." Then Chae-Won moves on to the witness statements. This one in particular was given by an older woman in the village, Pyun-sok-ki. I was a neighbor for almost 10 years, but I never once saw him cry or laugh. He's always in his dad's workshop, and who knows what his dad might have taught him. He didn't seem to care, even when he heard that they found his mother's body. After Min-seok died, the village foreman was kind enough to take care of the kids, but look what happened. I always told him to be careful with Hyun-soo. She closes the case file and heads to Hyun-soo's shop with the forensics kit. She gets a hammer and starts hammering away at the lock on the basement door. When the lock gives away, she opens the door, and it just looks so much like the stairs that the news reporter took down into Min-seok's basement. She makes her way down the stairs and turns on the lights. But it looks normal. There's no bloodstains, no cage. In fact, the strangest thing is the grandfather clock that started ringing just now. She mixes the luminol and hydrogen peroxide solutions into a spray bottle and starts covering every nook and cranny with the solution. While she's doing this, Hyun-soo is getting ready to kill Kyung-chun. The dad had gotten him a doctor's uniform along with a bottle of narcotics to inject into Kyung-chun and a hospital cart. Don't leave an injection mark in his body. His dressing is usually replaced between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. every day, and the detectives take turns at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. There are 2 of them that are taking turns, so the night detective doesn't know anything about the dressing changes. So the plan is that Hyun-soo is going to pretend to be a doctor coming in to change Kyung-chun's bandages, and when the police officer leaves him to do his work, he'll inject the drugs into Kyung-chun, killing him. Hyun-soo puts on a mask and walks into Kyung-chun's room and tells the police officer that he's here to change the dressing. The officer, who's already dozing off, is skeptical. This late at night? I guess that detectives don't get nights off just like interns. I'm sure you're exhausted. Why don't you go get some coffee? Actually, I was kind of craving a smoke. The officer leaves and Hyun-soo approaches Kyung-chun, and he stares at him for a couple seconds, and after being completely still for the few seconds that Hyun-soo is staring at him, Kyung-chun suddenly opens his eyes. I've been waiting. I thought that you'd come to kill me. What are you up to this time? Where is Mi-seok? Do you really not know where she's buried? Just like you guys, I found out while watching TV that my dad was a serial killer. Is that so hard to believe? I figured that you'd tell me the truth when you came to kill me. Whether or not you believe me, I don't plan on saving you. You tried to ruin my life. I realized after laying here staring at the ceiling all day that all I really know about you are rumors, and that I may be wrong. I killed an innocent man and tortured you ruthlessly, so there's no need to hesitate. Hyun-soo loads up the injection with the narcotics and is about to put it into Kyung-chun's IV, but before injecting it, he says, "How did it feel when you found out that Mi-seok was dead? How did it feel to know that your wife died?" That is what you want to know? Why do you want to know that? Hyun-soo thinks about what Chae-Won said to him, about how he'll never know what she felt like during those 10 days. But he can't tell Kyung-chun that, so he instead goes, "I'm just curious. I wanted to die. Then why didn't you?" "Because I had something to do. I wanted to bring Mi-seok to a safer, more comfortable place. But she's dead already. What's the point? When people talk, the story will have a different ending." Hyun-soo is satisfied and injects the drugs into the IV bag. Outside, the police officer had finished his cigarette and is getting a drink from the vending machine when he overhears 2 doctors talking. Thank you so much for replacing Kyung-chun's dressing for me. Why are you so scared? He's cuffed to the bed." "I don't know, I feel like our eyes just keep meeting. It's creepy." And at this time, alarms start to go off in the officer's head. He approaches the 2 of them. "Excuse me, I'm a detective on this case. Do you replace Kyung-chun's dressing twice a day?" "It's only once a day." "And you already did it today?" When the doctors nod, the officer rushes back into the room, passing by a Hyun-soo who is changed back into his patient clothes. And inside Kyung-chun's room, the man is wide awake. His eyes are wide open, unblinking, and he's breathing heavily. But he is alive. His heart monitor isn't going crazy, and his vitals look okay. So what in the world happened? After Hyun-soo had injected the narcotics into the IV bag, he tells Kyung-chun, "About what you asked the other day, the wooden keychains with the fish, someone gave it to my sister at the funeral, and she gave it to me." "And you're telling me this now? Would you have believed me at the time? You probably would have abducted my sister and drowned her too. Who could it have been? Someone deliberately gave it to her. Why?" "The witness who saw your wife getting abducted, and me who vouched for my father's whereabouts. What if the witness and I were both telling the truth? Chae-Won starts struggling because this means that Min-seok really did have an accomplice. Hyun-soo looks at him and says, "You said that you have 2 months to live. How about you use that time wisely chasing the real culprit and not the ghost that is Hyun-soo?" Chae-Won starts violently struggling, asking Hyun-soo to remove the IV from his arm. He doesn't want to die. Remember that Kyung-chun is in police custody, so they handcuffed him and he can't remove the IV needle by himself. Hyun rolls his eyes, Hyun-soo rolls his eyes and says that his drip is blocked. After Hyun-soo had injected the IV into the little IV bag thing, he blocked the flow of the drip. Did you do that on purpose? Why? Because you told no one, even though you could. That reminds me of something. The police are curious as to why you tortured me, so listen to me very carefully. While Hyun-soo is trying to get his life back together, Chae-Won's life is crumbling. She'd finished spraying the lumina all around the room and had turned off the lights. And on the ground in front of her are 2 sizable glowing spots. We know that this is the area where he and Woojin fought, but Chae-Won doesn't know that. She then sees something glowing a little farther away, so she approaches it and picks it up. It's a cable tie. We know it's the cable tie that Woojin had ripped apart with the glass shard, but Chae-Won doesn't know that. Instead, all she can think about is the cable ties that she saw on the news earlier. She takes a seat on the cold, hard ground, thinking about the witness statements about the case, the ones that said they've never seen him show emotion, about how strange he was. And that's when Eunha's walker catches her eye. They'd put it in the basement for storage, and she thinks back to when Eunha was a little baby, like a literal baby. She was crying for her mom when Hyun-soo was moving her in her walker while trying to make some milk for her. And not once did he get annoyed. He checked the temperature of the milk, picked up Eunha with a smile on his face, and started feeding her. When Chae-Won came out of the room, he looked at her with a smile, telling her to go get some more rest. She spends the night crying in their basement. A couple days later, Hee-sung is back in his shop getting to work, and the radio is playing in the background. Park Kyung-chun, the suspect in the Hosindong Chinese restaurant murder case, was sent over to prosecution. According to the police, Mr. Park confessed to the killing of Mr. Nam and the kidnapping of Mr. Peck while being questioned by the detectives. He confessed the grudge that he harbors regarding the police investigation of the Yeonju City serial murders and is now claiming that they have to reopen the case. Hyun-soo also goes to pick up Eunha later in the day, and the two have a really cute conversation about how for Eunha, the clouds look like an egg tart, but for Hee-sung, it looks like Chae-Won. Remember that egg tarts are Eunha's favorite thing in the whole wide world after her dad. So he's gotten his life back to usual. Woojin, on the other hand, had finally convinced the witness to make a statement. She's now in their office being filmed, and Woojin starts off the interview by thanking her. "Once again, I'm grateful for your bravery that you're showing today. You know, I blame you. I was able to move on and forget that it ever happened, but after my encounter with you, I kept seeing her face." Her face? Chong-mi-suk's face. She'd been looking at me with such desperation in her eyes. She wants me to talk to you. I'll make sure that you don't regret this decision. So, let's go back to the year 2002. Miss Chung, you saw Chong-mi-suk, To-min-suk's last victim, get kidnapped. You then reported it, and later on, you changed your statement completely. Why? She pulls out a little cassette and puts it on the table. Back then, we had an answering machine at home. It's the tape from that. They play the tape, and it's chilling. A man with a super deep voice that's very clearly edited to throw people off had left her a message. "Lady, don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong. You're not the only one who saw me that night. I saw you too. You drive a red compact car, and I also know where you live and work. You should be careful for your kids' sake. Have you heard of the Kakungri village foreman murder? Do you know why he died? Because he got nosy. That good-for-nothing old man didn't know his place." Chae-Won is conducting her own investigation in the meantime. She finally goes to visit Seung-gil's wife, and Seung-gil's wife gives Chae-Won a black duffel bag. "Hyun-soo's bag. I found it while cleaning up the place. I looked inside, and it seemed like my husband kept the stuff thinking that Hyun-soo would eventually come back for it someday. He's been at large for 18 years. So, could this help catch him?" Chae-Won looks her straight in the eyes and says, "I will catch him." It horrifies me to think that there's such a horrendous criminal still out on the streets. You know, there were no eyewitnesses. sorry? I checked the criminal investigation report and no one actually witnessed Hyun-soo doing the unthinkable. But my husband said that he's not like other people. He told me that he's not normal, that he could do anything. That's why he was so scared. Psychopaths aren't capable of taking care of lives that are weaker than them. And she's thinking about how Hyun-soo takes care of Euna, and she continues. But Hyun-soo had a dog for about 10 years, and he even took care of its puppy. That is a fact. But he killed someone and is on the run. He's a murderer. That's also a fact. Yes, that's also a fact, but I want to know a lot more. People should only be punished for the crimes that they've committed, whether it's criminal punishment or a personal grudge. So I need to gather a lot more facts in order to give Hyun-soo the punishment he deserves. Let me tell you one thing about how I investigate. I only believe what I see. And that is where I'm going to end it for this episode. They do such a great job at building up tension in this drama, and I absolutely love it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I will see you for the next one. Bye!